Well, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to our first Wellness Economy Research Masterclass webinar with Catherine Johnston, Ophelia Young, and Tonya Callender. This is the first of three that will happen in 2024. Save the date for June 26th and September 25th for the next ones at the same time. I am Heidi Moon, the Communication Strategist for the Global Wellness Summit and Institute. Please, if you're just joining us, introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. Some quick logistics. Feel free to choose between gallery or speaker view. Please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. And I have muted everyone now. Speakers, you're going to stay unmuted, so you're all set. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Nancy Davis, Chief Creative Officer and Executive Director. Nancy, good morning. Over to you.
Thank you, Heidi, and welcome everyone to the Wellness Economy Research Masterclass with our esteemed Global Wellness Institute research team, Catherine Johnston, Ophelia Young, and Tonya Callender. The newest member of the research team, Joanne Hopkins, could not be with us today. I'm Nancy Davis, Chief Creative Officer and Executive Director of both the Summit and the Institute, and I'm your host for today's call. It's not possible in the time we have together to adequately describe to you the impact Catherine Johnston and Ophelia Young have had on the wellness industry. First, identifying and codifying the wellness economy, the bubble chart that has become the standard against which all other wellness economy data is measured. Then going on to produce groundbreaking reports on everything from wellness real estate to physical activity to a series of white papers for the Vatican during COVID entitled Resetting the World with Wellness, to reports on mental wellness and more. Their work is rigorous, evidence-based, and regularly downloaded by Fortune 100 companies, academics, governments, small businesses, and individuals like you and me. The Institute decided early on to make this extraordinary, important work available without cost, thus empowering the entire wellness industry. The first report on wellness tourism, the topic on today's agenda, was released actually in May of 2011. That report looked at medical tourism, wellness tourism, and the challenges and opportunities for spa. At the Global Wellness Summit in India, in 2013, my first summit, this distinguished team released the first comprehensive report about wellness tourism as its own distinct economy. Fast forward to today. March 27th, 2024 marks a new chapter in the history of wellness tourism, and Ophelia, Catherine, and Tonya will not only share data and insights, but also a new report being released today. They will give you the details in just a moment. I want to first introduce the woman who knew, in her very reliable gut, that research was what the wellness industry, then the spa industry, needed. The impact it has had could not have been predicted, not even by Susie's crystal ball. Please welcome Susie Ellis, Chair and CEO of both the Global Wellness Summit and Global Wellness Institute, the woman who took a tremendous leap of faith years ago and gave to the world the research on which we all rely. Susie?
Thank you, Nancy, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this GWI Masterclass. For those of you who are new, GWI stands for the Global Wellness Institute, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit whose mission is empowering wellness worldwide. The next 60 minutes, or I guess 55 minutes that are left, are a great example of that. We are going to have the opportunity to be the first to be introduced to a new concept that we know people will be talking about in the future. We are moving from wellness tourism to something that sounds very similar, however, is fundamentally different. I'm going to let our researchers tell you all about it. As Nancy mentioned, and I also remembered, it was your first summit, Nancy, quite clearly that 2013 Global Wellness Summit. It took place in New Delhi, India, And in fact, I was just thinking this morning that our theme that year was a defining moment. Indeed, it was. Not only did we hear from His Holiness the Dalai Lama and his thoughts on wellness, but Catherine and Ophelia introduced the landmark study that you had already mentioned, Nancy, the Global Wellness Tourism Economy Report. At that time, those of us who were around might remember that very few in the world were even using the terms wellness and tourism together. And here we are 10 years later, as they once again show the way forward. I really look forward to hearing their insights. Thank you all for joining this masterclass. And now back to you, Nancy.
Thank you, Susie. I thought the theme of defining moment had to do with the fact that it was my first summit, but I guess it had that too.
It had multiple applications.
Okay, well, now it's time for the main event. After we hear from this amazing team, we will try, if we have time, to get to a few questions. It's my pleasure now to turn this over to Tonya Callender, GWI Research Fellow, who will set the table for the research banquet we're all about to enjoy. Tonya?
Well, I hope everyone is very hungry because the team is really excited to share our insights about the wellness tourism industry, as well as wellness in tourism. And of course, some data. So before we get into the data, I would really like Ophelia and Catherine to take us back a decade and talk to us a little bit about how they developed the framework and how they were able to put a number on wellness tourism. And either one of you can choose to go.
Okay.
Who's feeling bullish today?
I'll start. So if you have seen any of our presentations about the wellness economy, you know that we always introduce ourselves as economists because our background is not in hospitality. And so when Susie commissioned this report from us and asked us to measure the size of the wellness tourism industry, our first question is, what is wellness tourism? Which actually also brings us back to the question of what is wellness. And I can say in 2013 is the first time we really gave some thought on how to define wellness, and from wellness then lead to what is the kind of tourism that would be considered wellness tourism, and then how do we quantify it? And if you think back about 10 years ago, the sort of hot tourism segments is ecotourism. People talk about ecotourism and some other things like nature tourism. And then we also have a sector called medical tourism. And some destinations would promote their offering using the term health tourism even. So there was a lot of confusion back then on what is wellness tourism. So that was our first task. I don't know, Catherine, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, so the interesting, I mean, some of you who've heard us speak before have heard us talk about, again, how important definitions are. Sometimes we spend a year on a project and we spend 6 months defining it before we can even get into, the numbers, because if we can't define it, we can't measure it. So the revelation we had when we were, hashing out how do we think about and talk about wellness tourism, we actually have to credit to Beth McGroarty, who's, as you know, GWI and GWS's other brilliant researcher and, works on PR. And, Beth reminded us at that time, she said, hey, travel is really unwell, and it's like, wait, yeah, we all travel. It's awful. We feel terrible. We have flight delays. We have, cancellations. We go to the hotel, we can't sleep well. There's sound problems. I mean, the list of travel woes is endless. And, we talked about how all of us, you come back from a vacation, you need a vacation to recover. So that was actually the spark of how we started thinking about defining the wellness tourism sector. And the idea that, wellness tourism is the idea that, travel should feel good. It should make us feel better. We go on a trip to escape, to relax, to rejuvenate. And when we travel, we should be able to do that. And so that's how we, first came up with this definition of wellness tourism, which is on the screen. And we define it as both maintaining or enhancing our personal well-being when we travel. Now, those two words, and they're in pink on the screen, are important because what we also came up with, which was revolutionary at the time and very new, and I think has become standard in the tourism industry now, is this concept of primary wellness tourism versus secondary wellness tourism. And let me switch the slides so you can see our definitions for that. So this links with the idea of maintaining and enhancing our personal well-being when we travel. Now, many of you are probably familiar with this concept now because we've been talking about it for 10 years. If we go back to 2013, this was new. A lot of people didn't even like it when we first, threw these concepts out there because, they either didn't understand the distinctions or, back then people, when they thought about traveling for wellness, they thought about spa retreats and destination spas and wellness retreats, the things that we all know are very directly associated with wellness. But our definition really wanted to embrace a concept of wellness travel that was much more holistic and broad than that. So I will punt it back to Ophelia and she can explain the primary and secondary distinctions.
So when people talk about even use the word wellness and wellness tourism back then, the people are really thinking about going to a place like a destination retreat and or maybe a yoga retreat, but it is a destination where their motivation is wellness. So that is what most people think of as wellness tourism. But as Catherine said, we thought there is a much bigger market and a broader definition of how to help people to stay well while they travel. And we also kind of borrow from the concept of LOHAS, if any one of you are familiar with that. It's like a consumer segmentation, like a destination, the lifestyle of health and sustainability. And so we thought about that using that concept. I mean, there are people who are, sort of like the more green and educated consumer, LOHAS. And often they segment the consumer into the core consumer and the more peripheral. So the core ones are the early adopters and they're all in, whereas then they're the sort of like the bigger group that is maybe less committed and they're kind of interested. And so sort of from there, then we develop this concept. We have a whole other segment of what we call secondary wellness travelers, whose motivation or the purpose of the trip is not wellness. Like they're not going to a wellness retreat or a destination spa or a resort. They might be going to visit family and friends or take the family, or they are, going on a business trip, but they want to maintain their wellness or their healthy routines, and they have interests and intention in bringing some of these habits and continuing them during travel. So we thought that's a really big segment that we should include. So that's how we came up with these two. And I can tell you that when we first introduced this and also review our estimate for the size of the wellness tourism market, there was some pushback because even people in the wellness industry, because some people want to count just the spa visit or maybe the stay at the destination resort as the market. They don't want to count the hotel room unless it is like a wellness hotel or a resort or a spa, or they don't want to count meals or other activities. Whereas we say that if somebody is bringing their wellness lifestyle or have some interest and intention with them on their travel, then all of their spending in all these activities, there is a wellness component. It's not generic. And I think that proved to be kind of prophetic because now we can see, it had expanded into healthy food, all kinds of activities, healthy hotel rooms, and much more.
Well, it's interesting to hear that originally you had that pushback because now everybody just can't wait to see the latest data. So speaking of data, I think perhaps Catherine could start to share with us some of the latest data on wellness tourism that we have.
Yes, and before I jump into the data, I just want to give you this overview slide because we've actually, our first report on wellness tourism came out in 2013. We have done a number of reports on the topic since then. Sometimes people don't know all the things we've released over time, so I put it all on one slide for you. And just to give you the overview of that, there was actually a predecessor to the 2013 report that we put out in 2011. This was one of our very first pieces of research that we did in the first few years with the summit. And that report was an early exploratory report looking at the differentiation between medical tourism and wellness tourism, because that was something that people didn't understand then. Are they different? You know, and our thinking on that has evolved since then, but that was really the foundational work that we did on the topic. And then in 2013, we did the first full-fledged report on defining wellness tourism, the secondary and primary definitions, and then putting out the first data. In 2018, we did an update and sort of refresh of that definitional report. So if you're looking for, the most sort of comprehensive and in-depth report, capturing all of our thinking, our analysis, our definitions on the wellness tourism as a concept, you should look for that 2018 report. We also did a short sort of thought piece in 2020 during the pandemic. That was part of the white papers we did for the Vatican. That was like, we called it Travel and Wonder, but it's a very short white paper thinking about, what is travel and wellness travel going to be about as we emerge from the pandemic. Now, if you're looking for our data, most of you are probably familiar with the Global Wellness Economy Monitor. That report in the past has come out every couple of years. We announced last fall, that's now going to be an annual report. So you can see the latest one, the 2023 one, which is one we released last November, has the newest data that we have right now on wellness tourism. There will be a new one coming out with updated numbers this fall in November. And then our newest report, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this webinar, the cover you see in pink is our new Wellness Policy Toolkit for wellness in tourism. So these are all the resources you can look for on our website if you are not familiar with all of these reports. So just to jump into some numbers, these numbers, most of them are the numbers that we released in the Wellness Economy Monitor last November. We have a few new things for you on this webinar, but I just wanted to start with the overview of the market size. Now, these numbers that we have right now are for 2022 because they're the numbers that we produced last year. We always have to look a full calendar year backwards. So they feel a little bit old now, but soon in the fall, we'll have the 2023 figures. But for now, 2022, we measured wellness tourism as $650 billion for the market size. You can see here on the slide the breakdown by region. Clearly, North America and Europe kind of dominate this market globally in terms of the amount of spending, followed by Asia Pacific. Also, the top 10 countries on the screen there, which kind of mirror those regions. You can see the United States leads by far, and then a lot of the other largest country markets are in Europe and in Asia Pacific. But I want to move on from this now because I have some fun charts for you. Because what we decided to do for this webinar is go back and put all of our wellness tourism numbers for the last 10 years on some charts, which we have never done before. Because normally we're looking at sort of a smaller slice of years, like a 2, 3, 4 year time trend. So here you can see, and I'm going to start with the trips numbers. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to explain a little bit about how we measure this sector. That sometimes causes some confusion with people if they're not familiar with how tourism measurement is done. We follow the conventions that are done in the tourism industry for measuring general tourism. And what that means is we count or estimate the number of trips that are made, and then we estimate the expenditures based on an average spending profile for trips. So for wellness, what you're seeing on the screen here is the number of trips worldwide that we estimate were taken by primary wellness or secondary wellness travelers over that set of 10 years. Another thing that we do in these numbers that people are not always aware of is we are measuring international or inbound tourism. So that's country to country tourism. We're also capturing domestic travel here, which is a very sizable and important segment of the market. A lot of people who work for governments and tourism ministries, they really tend to focus on that international component of tourism. And they don't always count the domestic tourism in the figures, but we feel the domestic part is very, very important to this market and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So, you go back, look at our 10-year trend here, you can see that the number of trips has been growing a lot pre-COVID. The average annual growth rate was 8.6%. You can then see visually the plummet in 2020. And interestingly, when we look at it over 10 years, the 2020 figure was actually lower than what it was in 2012 when we first estimated the wellness tourism sector. This is not unique to wellness tourism. The plummet is all of tourism. As we know, borders were closed, people couldn't travel, the whole tourism industry collapsed in that year and has been recovering since then. So you can see, the trips climbing back out from 2020, 21, 22, climbing back out of that trough. We have a pretty, high growth projection for trips. Also, the trip projections we've never released before. These are new. We hadn't shown those last year, but we do project that as of 2023, last year, the number of wellness trips will have fully recovered and exceeded its pre-pandemic level, and will continue to grow at a steady pace from there. I'm going to jump over to the expenditures. If you can see visually, these charts look very similar. The growth patterns are kind of the same over the 10-year time frame. So, we estimate the number of wellness trips. We then look at expenditures, and then, it's a multiplication, number of trips times average spend per trip, and that's your overall market size, or the expenditures number. And again, we're capturing both secondary and primary wellness trips here, and we're capturing both domestic and international. So you can see, again, the strong growth pre-COVID, the trough, the regrowth, and then very strong growth moving out for the next 5 years. That projected growth number, 16.6%, it's very high. The reason it's so high is because we're looking at recovery still. The market was down so far in 2020. It has to grow out a lot to dig out of that slump. Over the later years, like 25, 26, 27, that growth rate does taper off, and it goes back more to where it was pre-COVID, like in the 7, 8, 9, 10% range. But that average does look very high, 16.6% annual looking forward. So this chart gives you a comparison of the growth rates for wellness tourism versus all tourism. And this is something we've been talking about for 10 years, ever since we've been studying this sector, is that the interest and demand for wellness tourism is very strong, growing very fast, and it is growing faster than all of tourism. And that's been consistent for the entire period that we've studied this market. So I segment these into sort of chunks of years. If we go back pre-pandemic and look at the 2012 to 2019 timeframe, the pink is the wellness tourism. It was growing about 25% faster than the rate for all tourism in gray. If we look at the pandemic year, that initial 2019 to 2020, we see the drop in both markets. Wellness tourism did not drop quite as much as the overall tourism market. So wellness tourism, negative 51%, all tourism, negative 55%. The next 2 years coming out of the pandemic, 2020 through 2022, you can see the recovery in pink of wellness tourism has been, again, much faster than that of all tourism. And then when we look out at the projection, the 22 to 27 timeframe, again, faster growth in wellness tourism than in the market overall. So this is another metric that we measure for wellness tourism, is what percent of all tourism trips have a wellness component, either primary or secondary? And again, this is a metric that has been growing steadily since the very first year we measured it. Back in 2012, we estimated that wellness trips were about 5.8% of all travel. That has continued to grow even during the pandemic. And as of 2022, it was up to about 7.8% and will continue to grow. So this is, again, it shows just the ever increasing, segment of travelers who in some way, either as a primary or secondary trip, are seeking to include wellness elements in their travels. This is a breakdown over 10 years of the share of trips that are primary wellness trips versus the share of trips that are secondary wellness trips. The primary wellness trips, which again is usually probably what a lot of people think of when they think of wellness tourism, that's the dark green at the bottom of each bar. You can see it's actually not the majority of wellness travel. Most of wellness travel is that light green, which is secondary wellness trips. This has not changed a lot over time. There has been a slight growth, slight increase in the secondary portion, but that may be due to COVID. I would say over time, this has stayed pretty static. About 11 to 13% of wellness travel is in the primary segment, and the rest is secondary. And then one other breakdown I wanted to show you, because I had mentioned it earlier about the international travel versus domestic travel. Here we're breaking down the share of trips that are domestic and the share that are international. International travel is the dark green at the bottom of the screen. You can see that's not the majority of wellness travel. Most of it is domestic travel. And that's typical for most people that, when we take trips, we do a lot of trips closer to home. We may take some bigger international trips less frequently. They cost more. This mirrors how people travel. But I think a lot of people forget when they're doing promotion and sort of product development and market development for tourism, how, important it is to target those domestic travelers. And that is a shift that happened during COVID, was that a lot of, when people couldn't get international visitors, they did start targeting more of the domestic market. And, we hope that that will continue. And then just a couple more slides, because we want to move on. One other concept that we talk about a lot in wellness tourism is the premium, or how much these travelers spend. This is one reason that so many destinations and regions are increasingly wanting to target wellness travelers, is because they are higher spend tourists. They spend more money on a trip than your typical visitor. And this is the premium that we've estimated for international wellness travelers. We estimate that they spend 41% more than your typical tourist. Domestic wellness travelers, the premium is huge. They spend about 175% more. I also put the premiums on some time series graphs, because we've never done this before. It's interesting to look at these patterns. You can see that the premium for international tourists over there on the left with the dark pink bars has actually gone down over time. The premium for domestic wellness tourists, the light pink bars on the right, that's gone up over time. There are a few reasons we think this is happening. Part of it, we think, is due to the pandemic. The last few years, as people were doing less international travel, they were taking the money they spend on traveling and putting it more into domestic trips and spending more on those. On the international side, we think that the premium is going down because of the growth in this market, that there's just been a huge explosion in the offerings that are available at different price points. 10 years ago, you had to spend a lot of money and go to a high-end spa or wellness retreat if you wanted to do primary wellness travel internationally. Now there's so many more offerings for the mid-market, so that the premium has gradually gone down because people don't have to spend as much, but they have so many choices available to them. So that's just a taste of our data. And I'm actually going to take the slides off the screen here for a moment, because we want to spend some time talking about what we see in the future, what's shaping our research over the next few years on wellness tourism, how we see the market evolving. So I'm now going to give the mic to Ophelia, who's going to give some of her thoughts on sort of the future of this market.
I saw that in the chat that a couple of people mentioned medical tourism and whether it's part of it, and that's a really good question. So I just want to go back to when we were defining wellness tourism. One of our goal was to really distinguish it from what we consider medical tourism, because there was a lot of confusion. So we actually developed like a graphic of a continuum of people who are sick to people who are living sort of in an optimal, state of well-being, and then kind of plot, sort of medical tourism on the continuum on people really traveling to the purposes to treat an illness. So they're going for a procedure, for a special treatment or dental work, and maybe even for in vitro, fertilization, or those kinds of services, and to distinguish it from the kind of travel which is on the sort of the wellness side. So I think we were quite successful in doing that since 2013, and I think there was less confusion. So what I'm seeing now is actually is in the market is pretty interesting because we're seeing a medicalization of wellness in some aspects of the wellness industry. And those of you who have come to our annual trends report and listened to Beth sort of talk about the trends, she had used the characterization of the sort of emergence of a soft care and a hard care kind of divergence in wellness. So we're of course then we're seeing this now in the wellness tourism market, where on the more hard care side there is more medical diagnostics using technology. A lot of it is in diagnostics, sort of blood analysis, DNA analysis, all kinds of scans, microbiome analysis, and a lot of them super expensive. And then they're often framed under the sort of longevity theme. So that is happening. And so it is sort of interesting. We work so hard to say, oh, medical tourism is different from wellness tourism. But now we're really seeing the medical side in wellness tourism. But I would still say that should be distinguished and separate from the kind of medical tourism where people travel to get their open heart surgery, or they go to a place where the treatment is better or more affordable or available. So it's different. But on the other end, we're also seeing in wellness travel, the sort of the soft care side, where people are trying to be even less purposeful in their wellness travel in terms of like optimizing the thing, but rather, schedule, like to have no schedule, do less, is kind of like the lying flat version of wellness travel, where people focus more on their mental respite, or connection with nature, or maybe finding community with like-minded people, or maybe maybe for some kind of a pilgrimage, like another trend that it was reviewed in our trends report. So what we see is really there is like a really a huge proliferation of a differentiation opportunities for everyone in the business, because there's so many different kinds of travelers and consumers who have different needs, from the softest, most spiritual, soft side to the more medicalized side. So this is going to be a pretty interesting space to watch for the next few years. Catherine, Antonia?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So, one of the things that we do every year when we do those numbers is we do a huge sweep of the world and really take a close look at, country by country, what's happening in those markets, what's happening at the Ministry of Tourism level, what are they promoting and developing. And, one thing that we've seen, honestly, just in the last year is, wellness tourism was growing fast before COVID, but there has truly been an explosion of interest at the country level, at the government level, and promotion level in really emphasizing this sector, and also doing I would say a better job at differentiating the products that they're offering, and really connecting it better with a more holistic sense of wellness. And I'll just give you a very quick sample of what we see happening in Asia, because there's a lot happening there. And kind of two trends in Asia. On the one hand, you have countries that have been doing well with wellness tourism and are known for it, really starting to differentiate their offerings. So places like Thailand, Indonesia, India, some of those countries have had a lot of primary wellness offerings for a long time, and a lot of people traveling there. They're known for certain types of wellness experiences. But the shift that's happened in the last year is both at the regional level and the ministry level, you really see them trying to develop a more authentic product and market it. So, there's a campaign in Indonesia, they're focusing on what they call ethno wellness. Something in Thailand, they have this meaningful wellness campaign. And what's behind that is the idea that they understand that, people are looking for authentic experiences that are connected with, what's uniquely Thai, what are the unique traditional and indigenous sort of offerings in different parts of Indonesia. I mean, they're trying to develop those more, connect them more with tourism, and market them more. Also in those countries, we see a huge emphasis on natural environment, especially hot springs, and developing those to be a competitive tourism product in the international arena. So just the shift in focus on that in the last year has been astounding. At the same time, there are many other Asian countries that have not necessarily been well known for wellness tourism offerings that are focusing hard on developing it. So places like Singapore, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, even Macau. In Singapore, they have a huge wellness sector. They're really starting to try to develop more of the secondary wellness part of the market because that's what they feel like they're well situated to target. Building on their city in a garden reputation, and having more wellness offerings for business travelers because there's so many in Singapore to embed wellness experiences into their visits to Singapore. Philippines has had a huge emphasis in the last year on developing a uniquely Filipino brand of wellness, that they are bringing more Filipino sort of indigenous concepts and practices, developing services and products around those and starting to market them to the international market. So the shift in that has been momentous in the last year. I think we're going to continue to see that. And I think that also segues into what Tonya wanted to talk about for a moment, and that's going to lead us to our new report. So Tonya, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I'm the bridge between I think wellness tourism and wellness in tourism. Thinking about trends, Catherine was talking about diversification with regards to wellness products. And one of a trend that I see is diversification of wellness consumers. We're seeing groups that in the past might have been unrepresented in the wellness tourism industry who are increasingly looking at travel, and they really want to fully experience wellness tourism opportunities. But on the side of the wellness providers, you're also seeing an interest in attracting an increasingly diverse group of guests, and they're allocating resources to do so. Talking about hot springs, I'm thinking about in Spain, they're really promoting during the summer hot springs as a great way for older travelers to get into wellness, and they are providing discounted train tickets, they're providing transportation to help them get there, and they are refurbishing their spaces so that they can feel comfortable. Then I think over time, other groups are going to be able to continue to visit wellness places. I think we have online reviews and social media. So if a wellness provider isn't getting it quite right, they're going to know about it. And eventually they're going to learn what wellness and hospitality means to different clients. And then just finally, another issue that I was thinking about, Earth Day is coming up next month. And this issue concerns nature and the environment. We know that there's a growing interest in protecting the environment, and wellness travelers are starting to focus not just on what beautiful spot they're going to, but they're thinking about how their travel affects the global environment, but also the local environment that they're visiting. And so wellness destinations are thinking about the environment, they're thinking about sustainability, and they're starting to change how they operate. But when you talk about the environment and nature, there are a lot of questions that arise with regards to those natural destinations. For example, how are we going to conserve these parks and natural landmarks when you have all these wellness tourists visiting them? And are we using these wellness sites respectfully, especially if they are cultural or religious, of cultural or religious importance to the community? And more importantly, who's responsible for managing them? Are they the indigenous populations where these sites might be? Or is it the private sector or the local community? So these are some questions. And what you really need to think about is that each area, each region is going to have to balance the interests of the private sector, the wellness travelers, as well as the local community. And you know what? This can be a real challenge. So Ophelia Young, perhaps you will be able to talk to us a little bit about how we can think about wellness, not just as a product, but the wellness of the community and the environment that people travel to.
Mm-hmm. So perfect segue into our wellness and tourism toolkit. But before I get in there, I just want to recap that in 2022, our research report, actually, we focus on defining wellness policy, which is a departure from our normal work of defining and measuring a wellness sector. We're actually talking about policy because one of the most important values for the Global Wellness Institute is to bring wellness to all. And it has become increasingly obvious to us that we can keep measuring the wellness economy and it's growing and growing, but it doesn't mean that more people are benefiting from wellness or are able to, practice wellness. And so government has a very important role. So that's why we launched a defining wellness policy report 2 years ago. And that is also the beginning of a series of wellness policy toolkits that will address a domain of wellness in each of them. So we have already published a physical activity wellness policy toolkit last year. And today we're going to publish our wellness and tourism toolkit. And so you may ask, why did we say wellness in tourism and not wellness tourism policy? So going back to, our background, we're development economists. We have worked with a lot of industry, in different projects that when people talk about tourism policy strategy, they are looking at attracting more tourists, develop the place, creating jobs and getting more revenue. So that is the objective of a normal wellness tourism policy strategy when you go to, any country or region. But we thought now is really time to think more broadly about wellness and tourism instead of just promoting more wellness tourism and getting more revenue from wellness tourism. And I saw in the chat, someone asked, what about the wellness of their residents? And that is exactly what we've been thinking about when we looked at wellness and tourism, because we want to broaden this concept of wellness and tourism so that the wellness of the place will improve the tourism product overall, where at the same time, tourism not only benefits visitor, but the community, the workers, and the destination, and including the people who live there who would have access to the wellness amenities that are developed for tourists. So that is how, we looked at it much more broadly, and that's why we want people to talk about wellness tourism from now on and talk about wellness in tourism, because we want wellness to be present in all aspects of tourism, and that tourism brings wellness to everyone. So if we start talking about it slightly differently and think more broadly, I think we will find a lot more opportunities and see that this is really very much mapped onto what people really, now think about in tourism development, the responsible tourism, sustainable tourism, and the sort of how to address the over tourism or sort of poorly managed tourism and bring more benefits to the destination, preserving not only the environment, but the local people's way of life and their culture, and also really their livelihood, and maybe even their healing modalities, the healing tradition, and even the biological resources that support those healing traditions. So today we're going to make that toolkit available. And in this slide, you can just see the kind of topics that are addressed in the toolkit. And I'm not going to go into all of them, but just want to point to a couple of them. Like, for example, number 2, we said we want not only local business, but local consumer participation in the wellness tourism economy, because we know that in many countries, the tourism economy is very different from the local economy. So the local sort of the wellness offerings are really, developed for tourists, or they don't, and sometimes maybe local residents don't feel welcome, or they're, or maybe the operators don't find that is a market they understand or worthwhile promoting. And so we feel that there's a lot of opportunity to make sure that the local residents also benefit from it. And another aspect of it is that when a place has a lot of wellness amenities and culture and infrastructure, for the local residents, they are all also available to visitors. So that makes the whole place more attractive to wellness tourists. I mean, just think of a lot of the greenways developed by some of the major cities, or the High Line in New York is just one of the examples. But a lot of these amenities, these attractions or amenities, they're developed for residents. They will turn out to be very, very important asset for tourism as well. I don't know if Catherine and Tonya, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can jump in and just touch on a couple more of the topics we cover in here. Item 3, we feel is very important. This is something we've been talking about for a long time, is, we have an entire wellness industry that is providing services and products to consumers who want more wellness, who want to feel better, preventive health, but is that industry actually taking care of the wellness of its workers? And this applies to tourism very much so, but it also more broadly applies to spas and other wellness service providers. Are the people who are giving you your massage or your facial or your yoga retreat, are they being taken care of? How is their wellness? How can they deliver an authentic experience to you if they're being exploited? That's a reality in the tourism industry that is well known and needs to be addressed. But we felt like this is a very important topic to cover when we're talking about wellness in tourism and developing an authentic product that the businesses and the service providers that are bringing wellness to you as the traveler are experiencing wellness themselves. So that's one thing we really emphasize in this toolkit. And then I'll just touch on one more, because I did see a few questions popping up in the comments on some specific sectors, and I think number 5 touches on a couple of those. The statement there is a little bit generic, tracking market information and scientific research to inform policymaking, but we actually focus on 2 specific things under that. One is the growing market for psychedelic and cognitive enhancing drug-based travel. We also focus on the thermal and mineral spring sector, because those are 2 segments within wellness travel that have, Springs has been around a long time, huge growth. There's a lot of development and a lot of interest there and a lot of consumer demand for those offerings. And then on the psychedelics and the drug, wellness drugs, it's a new segment, not legal in a lot of places, but there's a lot of media attention on it and a lot of interest, and it's very small now but growing. And we felt that there really needs to be a lot more focus at the policy level on segments like that, where we need to make sure that the regulation of these sectors and the policies surrounding them are ensuring that they're growing in a safe and healthy way, and that the things being offered to consumers are appropriate, and just making sure we have the regulations and policies in place to ensure the wellness of the people participating in those activities. And so those are 2 small segments within the bigger market of wellness tourism that we focus on there. We also, on number 6, we talk about technology. Again, tech is something that comes up in every conversation we have about wellness, all the sectors. It's there in tourism. It's very important. It's growing. AI, everyone's been talking about, how is that going to affect the tourism industry? So we did want to address that. And whenever we talk about technology related to wellness, we kind of have to look at it 2 ways, because yes, it is a tool for industry. It provides information. There are many ways that tourism is going to benefit from AI and from technology, but there are a lot of drawbacks to it as well. We all know the impact that technology can have on our personal wellness and how we feel. How does that affect us when we travel? Are we trying to, when we're on a wellness trip, are we trying to do a digital detox and get away from the tech that's pervasive? And so in number 6, that policy segment, we really take kind of a balanced look at making sure that technology in tourism is a tool for good, but it's also supporting and enhancing the wellness of the people who are traveling and not detracting from it. So please take a look at the toolkit. It's downloadable on our website today, and you can get all the details.
And I just wanted to add, sometimes when people think about policy, they think about macro level policies, but these toolkits are really there for people who are working on the micro level in wellness. And I wanted to reiterate the important role that wellness providers can play in the wellness of people in the surrounding community. It was wonderful. I read an article about a woman in the Caribbean who had become highly trained in specific wellness services, but she made sure that she took part of her week to open up a local place where locals could come and learn and benefit from some of these services. And I think it's really important to make sure that whatever community you're in, you are trying to make sure that everybody can benefit from these wellness products and services and the knowledge that we have.
All right, I think now we tried to leave a few minutes at the end for questions. So I think if Nancy's going to moderate,
Sure.
but Nancy, do you want to coordinate
Yeah, if you
sending
would,
some questions our way?
stop sharing for a minute.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to put up a slide in at the very end with a QR code for easy downloading. But when you go to our website after this call, you'll be able to download that report without cost. And I think it will probably answer some of the questions that have come up. But if you do have a question, we're going to try to get to a few. Put your virtual hand up like Liza has, and I will call on you. And when I call on you, unmute. You got 30 seconds. Your name, where you're calling from, and your question. And I'm going to ask the research team to answer quickly so we can get to a few. So Liza, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Liza Horan, an American in Edinburgh, Scotland. You talked about the segments within wellness tourism. How close are you now to actually breaking out spiritual tourism and the holistic natural, which sounds like it would include indigenous?
I can answer that. I mean, honestly, we're not able to break down the wellness tourism numbers further than we have. The reason for that is because, I mean, first off, there are infinite iterations of, types of trips. You mentioned the spiritual, tourism, the, holistic tourism, and we have spa tourism, we have springs tourism, we have psychedelic tourism. I mean, we can go on and on and on about the niche segments within wellness tourism. And it varies by country. Some countries are very dominated by one of those niche segments. Some have many. So, our process, I mean, we're making estimates, right? Like, we can't count every trip that people make and their intention for that trip and where they go. So we have to make estimates based on the data available to us. There are some countries who do, in their national tourism statistics, track some pieces of wellness tourism. A lot of European countries track their version of spa tourism. Some countries do visitor surveys where they ask people, different motivations for travel or different experiences that they incorporate in their trips. Those are the types of resources we use to make our estimates. So we can, at a high level, make an informed estimate for a country about what share of visitors are doing wellness experiences, either primary or secondary, but we can't break it down any further. And I'm sorry about that. There's so much demand for this data, but to do that at the global level is impossible. I think there are countries within their national tourism statistics who could try to do those breakdowns if they are focusing on the segment, and I hope more of them will as this segment grows.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Liza. We've got to get to another question. Ben, if you could unmute, and Liza, if you could mute again. Thank you. Ben, so you could turn your video on. We need your video and your question.
Hi there. I'm not prepared for video. I just have a quick question. How can third-party independent companies, for example, not a travel agency nor a provider, who are correlated with travel and very interested in wellness travel specifically, support GWI's goals of bringing wellness tourism to all? For example, we don't control prices or policy or offerings and so forth.
Thank you, Ben.
I think as tourism businesses, there is a role in educating consumers, because some people may still think of wellness tourism in a more narrow way and think that maybe they can't afford it or it's not for them, it's not accessible to them. But really, there are more and more products for people at different price points and different interest groups and different groups of people. So I think it's really a matter of bringing some of this awareness to the customers.
Tonya, did you want to comment on that? I saw you unmute for a sec.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Ophelia said it very well. I think information is very powerful nowadays. Learning how to connect people with the resources they need and the information. And it's surprising online how many kind of grassroots efforts there are for different groups trying to find out about wellness and where they can go and pursue their wellness. I know people say bad things about social media, but there are a lot of people out there who are not traditional wellness tourists who are going out and telling their story, and word of mouth or the social media and online has really been helping. And I think if you can just, as Ophelia said, education and awareness, provide resources and information to these groups, it will go a long way towards
Thank you, Tonya. Sagar, you've got 30 seconds.
Hi everyone, I'm from India, Healing Gateways. I'm experienced medical tourism facilitator. My question is to all that what is the future of wellness tourism facilitator in their entire process?
Sorry, I didn't hear the end. Future of wellness tourism facilitator. What else did you say?
I mean, I'm asking what is the future of, as a facilitator, what is the future of facilitator in this entire process?
A facilitator meaning the third parties in the travel sector, like tour operators, travel agents. Yeah. I mean, I think, obviously the role of the third party facilitators has been shifting for a long time in travel, right? Due to technology and all the things that we know are happening. But, my sense in this space is that, those remain a very important component of this market because, when people are looking for certain types of wellness experiences, and I would say especially on the primary wellness travel, they need help. It's hard to find, if I want to go to India and do an Ayurvedic experience, how do I find the reputable providers and, specifically what I'm looking to address and, what's going to be a real experience, what's not, that's very challenging for people looking for very authentic and even sort of medical crossover style wellness experiences. So, my sense is that for those types of very, localized, indigenous, specialized, medicalized primary wellness travel, still very important. And there's a role to play to educating travelers and,
Thank you,
really
Catherine.
providing
And
good
we're
information.
out of time. I'm going to ask Heidi to put up the slide with the QR code so that while we are still here, you can bring your phones to the screen and grab that direct download of the report, which I know everybody wants. And while you are doing that, I just want to say tremendous gratitude to our Global Wellness Institute research team who do this incredible work. And we're very excited that we have a series this year with access to these wonderful women and their work. And I hope you will join us at the future ones. You will get a follow-up email. They will have links. They will have slides and information and the things a lot of you have asked for in the chat. And I would just say, everybody unmute and let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much for coming.
Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Yeehaw.
Thank you so
Well
much.
done. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
Thank you.
Everybody
Nice to
again.
see you, Susie, Nancy.
Hi, Susie.
Nice to see so many of you.
Bye.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
See you in Scotland.
I miss you already.
Sally, Sandy,
Hi.
Amy. Oh, it's so nice to see so many of you.
I'm trying to copy down some of these emails from the chat before I leave, but there's too many. Anyway, bye, Susie. See you.
Bye-bye.
everybody.